Hi everybody, today we're talking about how to create a games-based football drill. Hopefully going to give you some ideas for your sessions as well as some activities that you can use as well. Followers of ours will know we're big fans of the games-based approach. We went away from unopposed work and have used the games-based model now for years. But we do get a lot of questions. We get a lot of questions from grassroots coaches, things like how can I apply it to my training? What if I'm working with beginners? Surely they need unopposed work. Isn't games-based just playing matches? That's not proper football training. So we want to show you that games-based doesn't mean just playing matches, and also show you how we adapt things for very young children or complete beginners so they get what they need technically, but they also improve their decision-making skills, which is often the thing that is missing with unopposed ball mastery or cone drills, etc. Our view is that you often only have your players for a short period, so you need to maximise that time with activities that will help them get better at football or not just better with a football, if that makes sense. No one's saying there isn't a place for unopposed work, but our opinion is that place isn't during group training when you can get so much more out of that time. So to give you a simple example, we're going to take an old school game that we all know and love, Bulldogs, and step by step show you how we can adapt it to get us closer to the game of football. And the inspiration for this came from we had a message on social media from a grassroots manager that was talking about how he uses this game because his kids love it, and he said he uses it as a warm-up, and I completely get that. Back in my early days as a coach, I sometimes used games or drills that weren't really football, but I could see how much the kids enjoyed it, and that's definitely not to be disregarded. The challenge is, can we take these things that the kids love but adapt them so they're closer to football, and that way we're winning on both fronts. The kids are getting something they really enjoy, but they're developing for football at the same time. So I wanted to use this today as a very, very simple activity, something that everybody can relate to, and step by step show you how we'd look to improve it and get it closer to the game of football, or at least develop those football things that we need. So the first thing to say is you can vary this. I've got this on the screen here with this number of players, but you can vary it if you have more players. You could either duplicate it and have two games side by side, or make the area bigger depending on your space and have more players in the same activity, but you get the idea. In sunny Leeds, we call this Bulldogs, but you might know it as something else. Children need to run, dodge the defender in the middle, and get to the other side. If they're tagged, they either sit out, swap places with the defender, or become an additional defender. We've all played it, great game, but it's not football. Some will argue, well, yeah, but we could use it to warm up. You could, but still, we're trying to maximise this time, and you're going to waste 10 minutes of your session on something that likely has very little transfer to football. So this is the starting point, and now we ask, how can we make this into a games-based activity for football? When designing a game for our sessions, we start with what is football. What's present in the game of football that we need to extract and put into our drills to take them closer to the game, and therefore develop the habits and decision making on and off the ball that the children need. We start with the game and we work backwards from there, depending on things like the age and ability levels of the players that we're coaching. We scale it up or down based on their needs, and that's the first takeaway for you today is games based doesn't just mean playing matches. At one end of the scale, it might be that we are just playing a match, but perhaps we're doing things like changing the pitch size or the number of players to provoke things like passing or dribbling. That's an example of something on one end of the scale towards the game. But again, that might be something that we go into more detail about in future videos. Today we're talking about working with beginners. So at the other end of the scale would be unopposed activities and activities without the ball, which are things like this, like Bulldogs. So now we look to move this further up the scale, and how do we do it? Going back to what I said, what is present in football? What are the key elements that make a football match? Well, we have a ball, obviously. We've got a direction of play. So when we need to move the ball towards the opponent's goal and away from ours, we've got opponents, we've got teammates, we've got goals, because everything is centered around scoring at least one more than the other team. So there's always goals present in a football match. And then we've got consequences, and what that means is there's a consequence to our actions. If we lose the ball, the consequence is we go from attacking to defending, and the other team might score. Okay? So, by the way, I should apologise here for my tactical bad skills. I'm all right at yapping on about all this sort of stuff, but I'm not very good at putting it all together on the computer, so do bear with me. Right, almost everyone watching this will know what was coming. Each attacker now has a ball, so this is a step up the scale. In this example, we also have an opponent, the defender in the middle, and we've got a direction for the attackers to move into. So the attackers and the defender need to make a decision. So again, not too bad, we're a step in the right direction. And it's probably a good time to talk about that defender in the middle here, because we know there will be plenty watching this who will argue that beginners couldn't get past the defender. So surely they need to do unopposed training first. They can barely kick a ball and blah, blah, blah. In that case, think about what you could do to adapt this to make it easier for the attackers and harder for the defenders, so we create more opportunities for success for the attackers. So you could, for example, have more attackers. Maybe you've split this into two areas, but if you really want to overload the defender and improve chances for the attackers, maybe you put more attackers in there. You could constrain the defender, so maybe it's things like, instead of being able to run, the defender can only hop. I'm not a massive fan of things like that, because they wouldn't just hop in a game. So I don't like doing things like that, but it is an option where you just make it a little bit harder for the defender to move, essentially, so it makes it easier for the attackers. You could put the defender into a zone, maybe get a couple of lines of cones, flat markers, what have you. The defender can't move out of that zone, so it gives the attackers a few more unopposed touches before the defender can get them once they get into those zones. So that's an option. You could be the defender. This is one that we do quite a lot with our very youngest kids, so maybe the 3 to 4 year olds, the preschoolers and so on, if we need to. This is where one of the coaches will act as a dummy defender, certainly initially. So they're there as sort of that, in a semi-opposed fashion, I suppose. They're not going to be going hell for leather trying to tackle little kids. It's more just that the kids have got to be aware that there's something that might be coming to try and steal that ball. And so they've still got to get their heads up, but it means the coach can control it. They can control how much success these kids are having. So that's not a bad option for you as a coach to get stuck in that way. It could be that you give the attackers some lives. So very often in these sorts of games, it's one of those where if the attacker gets tackled, they swap places with the defender. And then that defender, because they may be the weakest player or whatever, is in there for ages and ages and ages. But you could give the attackers lives. So they have 2 to 3 lives, which gives them chance to get more reps in. Maybe give them a challenge on the way back to start the drill again. So maybe they've got to the other end, and when they're coming all the way back to start again, it could be that you say, right, while you're dribbling, you've got to have 10 touches of that ball. If you are still really concerned about those unopposed touches, that's a perfect time to do it before they start and get their next rep in on the activity. So hopefully that makes sense. But if you spend 10 minutes now on this, you'll come up with more ideas. And one thing I would say is just challenge yourself as a coach when it comes to exposing young players to opposed training. This is a challenge we gave ourselves years ago, and we give our coaches, every new coach that joins us, and certainly all the coaches that have been with us. The challenge is, can you make your training as opposed as possible, regardless of the age and ability that we're working with? It takes a lot of patience. We've done a lot of learning and testing and adapting, but we've seen it can be done, and it should be done. It's to the point where our preschool sessions, they're doing some sort of opposed work for part of that session, but it goes back to the scale. We just scale it down, but can we still get that some form of opposition in there for them? So we're developing some good early habits. So what you'll often find with these sorts of games is the defender is just told to blast the ball away. So looking at that scale again, is that realistic? Is it a habit we want to develop? So let's look at moving up the scale again. And instead of just focusing on the attackers, which is often what happens in these games, we start to give the defender more game-like situations once they get the ball. If we're working with beginners, we might want to weight this in the attacker's favour, but we also need to be mindful of improving the defender, because this is their time as well. And it's also keeping them engaged, because it's going to be tough for them. If you're weighting these activities in favour of the attackers and the players that start with the ball, it can get very boring very quickly for that defender. So we need to keep them engaged, keep them motivated. So it could be things like this example here. If they win the ball, They get to dribble in the opposite direction over the opposite line to get a point. So we've got got the direction in there. It could be that we place 2 cones at the opposite side and challenge the defender that once they win the ball, they can try and pass between those 2 cones for a point. We could get a goal, so they have a chance to shoot if they win the ball. I've used the mini goal here, but you could use cones or a bigger goal depending on your equipment. But kids love scoring goals, so if that defender's got a really tough task, maybe saying you've got a chance to score if you get the ball, maybe that just gives them that extra bit of motivation that they need, so it keeps the session flowing and keeps them engaged. But we've given them a decision to make after they win the ball, which helps their development, and we've increased things in terms of the consequence for the attacker. If they lose the ball now, the defender can now go win a point. And with all that we go through today, all that's coming up, it's important to rotate that defender. I hope that goes without saying, but it just manages enjoyment and it manages tiredness levels as well. It's going to get boring for everybody if that defender is too tired or too disengaged to go and press, because then no one improves. Okay, so just make sure you bear that in mind. Another thing that we'd like to do, and again moving this forward, is we'd also challenge the attacker to recover and try and win the ball back. Again, a bit more game-like, and it's encouraging good habits. It means that if they lose the ball, they've got to try and recover quickly, just like they would in a game. It also means the defender now gets a chance to work on their dribbling, passing, or shooting, depending on how we've set it up, but closer to a football context, because now they've got an opponent to think about. It's not just, okay, you win the ball and you go get to have a free shot on goal. They've actually got to be mindful that someone's going to go try and tackle them. Okay, so thinking about what needs to be present to make this more game-like, what's been missing so far for the attackers? Goals. Okay, so they've been working on their dribbling, but can we add something else so we maximise their technical development in such a simple activity? So now we're going to challenge them to score a goal. I've used 2 mini goals here, and you might be wondering why. First, if we're working with beginners, in my opinion, it increases their chance of success. There's 2 goals to aim for, and then therefore it increases the difficulty for the defender. Second, it should provoke them to get their head up more. There's 2 possible options for them, and one might be better than the other based on what's going on around them. That could then quickly change, so they need to check to see where is best to go, and hopefully over time they'll start to check and check and check just to see where the best option is. So again, developing those good habits. You might use shooting lines, so they aren't kicking from unrealistic distances. And again, you might have a zone where the defender can't go, so it gives them a chance to shoot without being pressured. But as before, we challenge you to get it at 100% opposed. Plus, with only one defender, it should actually mean they'll get some at some point to shoot with a bit more time, because there is only that one defender at the minute. And again, I've used mini goals here, but cones are fine, or you might have one big goal in the centre, depending on the equipment. Okay, let's move up the scale. What else can we do? So we could introduce another defender or a goalkeeper to block the goals. Notice how we've kept the 2 goals, because we're still thinking about success for the beginners and maximising their chance of performing more football actions in this activity. So the 2 goals increase the difficulty for the blocker, and it should mean the attackers have to get their heads up to see where that free goal is. There should be a free goal all the time. It's essentially an extra 1v1 situation, but scaled down, because the blocker will only be covering that particular area. We could challenge the blocker as well, going back to what we did before with the defender. So it could be that if the blocker intercepts the ball, wins the ball, they can make a long pass maybe to the opposite goal, or allow them to go and dribble and shoot as well. So you've got options there, again, similar to the one before, but this is just another step in the right direction. It's just starting to increase the difficulty for the attackers, but not so much. Okay, it's taking it a little bit closer to that game situation. Next up, we focused a lot on individual work, but now we want to get teammates involved and perhaps look at some passing. So the attackers pair up and have a setup a little bit like this. It's such a simple tweak, but it takes us closer to the game without it being a massive overload for the players. The passers there, they get to kick the ball unopposed, but they've got to be mindful of where the defender is, which is closer to what they do in a game, but scaled down for their ability. Also, think about what this forces the receiver to do. They now need to scan to see where the defender is because they know there's only one defender. So they want to see where that defender is and obviously check for where the space is. But we as coaches have not had to tell them to scan. We're developing this habit, this unconscious habit, which is what we want. Of course, we may need to guide, but allow them time to explore it and see if they can work it out for themselves. Give them little nudges if needed, but just be patient and just see if they can work it out, because lo and behold, they will soon start to realize that because they've got the advantage, they need to check, because if they see that space behind them, they can just go and score, or at least go and try and score. So it's a great one in that regard. Again, we've just taken it that step closer, that step above, should I say, to on the scale. So the next one, we're going to look at a 2v1. So now we're going to have it so the passer can enter the area and act as a support player to make a 2v1. So if you zoom out now, you see how this starts to look more like a game of football without it being just a match. It's underload for the attackers and more of an overload for the defenders. So the attackers should still be getting lots of touches. They have more space and time compared to if we had more defenders, and they're making decisions similar to what they'd make in a match, but again, scaled down to suit their needs. We obviously, I'm going to let this run now, but we could obviously go on and on, but I'm conscious of this not becoming a monster of a video. Think about how from here you might scale this one up, and what you might add or change. One easy thing we do with any of these games is start to add more defenders once it becomes too easy for the attackers. That process could take weeks or months, but step by step, we overload the attackers in line with their progress and reaching the next level in terms of their ability. But we always start with the game. Can we start as close to the game as possible? If not, scale it back in line with what the players need and then aim to scale up from there. We might use a mix of similar games like this that disguise repetition, but don't be scared to repeat the same drill more than once, particularly if the players enjoy it and it's still developing them, because that's what it's about. It's about enjoyment and developing. But as I say, today we just wanted to go through some of this because we do get a lot of questions and we understand it as well. It's understandable that people do want to know more about it or do question it, especially when it comes to beginners. This is one thing that always goes back to but I work with beginners. I've got an under sixes, I've got an under sevens, but we've done this for a long time now, and believe us, it's taken a lot of patience. As I said before, it's taken a lot of testing and trying different activities and varying those activities, but it can be done and it should be done. You yourself might just need to be patient initially, but the development might look slower, but it's happening. It's hard to see the decision making skills in the children getting better until you actually, one day you'll just be watching it and there'll be a movement, there'll be something that a child does and it's like, wow, it's all coming together. But it's not going to happen overnight. It's just about being patient and sticking with it, because this stuff does work. And like I said before, we're not saying there isn't a place for unopposed work, but you've got to maximize that time you've got with these children, and that's by exposing them to what essentially they're going to be doing at the weekend, and that's playing a match. So what can we do to help them be more prepared for that match? But the thing that I hope you have taken from this is that it's not revolutionary. It's not overly complex. It's not some magic thing. The beauty of it is in how simple it can be. And this was sort of a wake-up call for me, really, when I first started looking at all this. Is I was trying all these, these really overly complex drills, cones everywhere, mannequins, all the pose, all that sort of stuff. And it doesn't need to be that. It can be really, really simple. And just look at this example. We've taken an old school game of bulldogs and then we've just adapted it slowly but surely and just added little tweaks here and there to the point where you're seeing them closer to the game of football. And we could go on, as I said before, we could go on and do lots more from here, but we just wanted to give you an idea today, really, of how we do things. But this is just an example, and then you can look at this. You can also look at the drills that you're doing, the activities you're doing with your kids, and then start to think about those principles. What is football? What can I take from football and add into my drills now to make them more game-like? And that might just be a couple of tweaks that just make all the difference. But assess it, look at it objectively. Think, get your session plans out and have a look at just what you can do to move up that scale. Please do comment with any questions or anything that you're not sure of. We're always pleased to help, and obviously, it's good. It's good to share ideas as well. So if you do some stuff that works really well, please do share it, because we're all still learning about our coach and how to improve things as well. So please do share. But lastly, don't forget to subscribe. Really appreciate you watching. And as I say, if you do need any more information, please do get in touch.